We gotta think this through. We're up to almost 20 arrests at last count. If you look at the probable cause, they all read just like yours. Information from a confidential source.
I mean, this seemed way too much for one snitch.
Oh, I agree. My gut tells me a wire, either in a phone or two, or maybe something in a room somewhere. You talk to your nephew on the phone about the Jersey thing?
Nah, of course not, man. No phones. When I talk to him face to face in my office in the back of the club.
Fuck. It's good you moved out of there.
Alex Cottrell and Toby Huntingford present Caught on the Wire. This podcast is an episode-by-episode analysis of HBO's widely acclaimed TV series about the city of Baltimore, its people, and its many problems. Find more information about the show and all the episodes online at caughtonthewire.wordpress.com.
Hello, welcome to Caught on the Wire. We're here for our final episode of Season 1, Sentencing. And as promised, we are joined by a mystery guest who is about to become a mystery no longer. What's your name, sir?
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Toby and Alex, for being on. This is Tom. I guess, how would I say, I've been friends with you guys for since uni started, so late 2010. And, been watching Wire with you for pretty much since then, really. I don't know if I introduced you both to the show or not. Is that true?
I was wondering if you mentioned that bit.
Possibly.
No, I'm not saying that smugly, because it's just introducing someone to a show. It's not really that big of a deal, but I just wasn't sure. I remember Alex buying it in first year, and I remember you picking up from CEX maybe a few years later, Tobe.
That's right. I think I got £34 for the full bumper box set, brand new.
Jesus.
So I was
kill a
pretty
man
happy
for it. So.
I was very happy. But yeah, that's enough of the history. Well, there's more history.
But yeah, just Tom is also a poet and art critic and spoken word artist.
I am.
Let's not leave that out.
No.
Do you want to plug your website? This is optimal plugging.
Oh,
time.
right. Well, I do actually have something to plug that I think maybe would be a little bit more fitting. Check me out. Just Tom Kwei Poet, KWEI, on Twitter and YouTube and stuff. But I'm also a massive fan of battle rap, and mentioned in battle rap numerous times is The Wire. Like there are literally hundreds of references to the show throughout all of the leagues around the world. So at the moment, I'm cutting together a video which has all the best quotes, which include about 50 references to Omar, but also references to like Prez Belusky and Templeton and Chris and Snoop and stuff. So yeah, if you search like Wire Battle Bars or Wire Battle Rap in about a week after this has been released, it'll be on YouTube. So any Wire fans probably like that.
Yeah, that sounds good. I look forward to seeing that.
Yeah, there's a surprising range. Like it justifies its existence.
Sounds like there's some pretty niche mentions in there. It's not just all the obvious stuff.
No, yeah, there is. There's one talking about what is it? Cutting ties, like the homicide department, which I quite liked.
Oh yeah,
Oh,
I thought that
beautiful.
was quite clever.
That's very nice.
Yeah. Soul said that. Who
So these guys clearly aren't just casual viewers. They're really
No. I mean, but there's literally like 50 I'm Omar bars. So it's kind of like you've got to cut those out. But there are like a lot of sort of like there's no like Ray Cole bars, but like there's decent stuff. It's not just cover stars that are mentioned.
Sweet. Right. So we'll be sure to put you towards that link once it's up on the net somewhere. We'll
I'll badger the Wire subreddit with it.
We'll give you a shout out. Yeah.
Thank you, man.
So yeah, it's obviously quite exciting to be at the final episode of Season 1, and we've got quite a lot to go through. So should we get into that recap?
A little birdie tells me that we've hit the 20 chapter mark. If that's a bumper episode, I don't know what is. So
yeah, there are 20 sections this week, broken up into the police in the street. So yeah, there's quite a lot. Some of them big, some of them small. All of them interesting.
Excellent. Right, should we jump in?
So, number 1. Kima Greggs awakens in hospital to find detectives Bunk Moreland and Ray Cole, who ask for her help identifying her shooters. She picks out Little Man from the photos, but not Wee-Bey, claiming she could not see the second shooter because he was outside in the dark. Bunk tells her about DNA evidence, the page from Wee-Bey to Stringer, and Little Man's prints on the can. An ID on Wee-Bey would make the trial easier, but Greggs is insistent that sometimes things have to play hard.
Damn.
And that's our opening scene.
Yeah, I mean, pretty straightforward opener, isn't it? Just showing us what Kima is really made of as a police officer. And she's kind of even straighter than Bunk, who's played this role so far. I remember that scene back in episode 2 where Bunk was all like, why the hell leak the witness angle to the bosses? And that was considered pretty straight arrow policing, but this really kind of does take it to the ultimate height. So,
sort of takes the principled stance on this one.
Yeah.
And obviously it sparks off straight away that she's straight back in business, and we kind of see the effects of that on like Cheryl, for example, later on. The fact that there is no pause, there is no rest period. Her only rest period is when she was literally unconscious, and the moment she becomes conscious again, it's like, right, back to the police. Kind of shows real police, as McNulty says later on.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. And she wakes at the start. It's not even like she's kind of been conscious for a bit. It's like she's barely spoken a few words and she's right into the IDing prospect. I mean, I don't know if you guys noticed, but I really liked the way the scene was set up in the sense where she wakes and sees Ray on her left. And so she's only aware there's one person in the room, and then Bunk's voice kind of comes off camera. And then we kind of pull out.
Yeah, that was nice.
So it really gives this sort of immersive sense. I really thought that was quite clever. I didn't notice that in the first watch.
It's almost like we have the reveal along with the character. It's a technique that's used quite a few times in the show, and very effective, I think.
Yeah.
And the cards hanging over her bed as well is a really nice touch. I don't know who would have sent those. I assume like maybe Cheryl and the drinking buddies we see in the earlier episodes.
She's got some friendlies hanging around.
Yeah, potentially. But the whole scene was really like sort of spread out in a really, really nice way. But Bunk immediately with that folder opening, there's very little kind of niceties with this. Obviously, because it's a pressing case.
Yeah, I mean, Ray Cole seems to be the one who's there to pay a little visit, and Bunk's there to be the businessman. I mean, there's no time wasting. He's not sugarcoating why he's there. He has come kind of to make sure that the trial plays out. So it's And Kima's clearly receptive to it. I mean, is it where we at full? I think that's the word she uses. So
yeah, and Bunk has that lovely line. A good man is hard to find in this city, 12 together especially. Which I thought was really nice. But I mean, the problem with thinking about The Wire, because I've been listening to the podcast and everyone comes. Not that this is a problem, but like the temptation to constantly draw parallels, like with scene by scene by scene. But this reminded me a lot of kind of like Orlando's, when he's taken in, it's kind of like this is initiation to the game and stuff like that, and he has to sign away all his deeds and stuff. It's very similar in the sense that Kima is just kind of presented with this thing right in front of her and kind of like, this is her world, these are the repercussions of what her choices were.
Definitely. I mean, I found a very nice parallel as well with this scene. If you contrast it with the immediate scene on the other side of the credits, where you get the most honest act of policing against the most deceptive act of policing, where McNulty's trying to go around the FBI. Going to the FBI around the chain of command, essentially. And we kind of get to see the complete two ends of the spectrum when it comes to these, the way they do their policing. So I thought that was quite nice to sort of stack them on top of each other.
With that in mind, should we move on to number 2, which is about that?
Yeah.
Yep.
So, Herc oversees arrests on Barksdale's dealers whilst updating the detail so that Prez can change the board to reflect the news. Daniels is worried about the case being closed without new leads, and McNulty suggests taking the case federal without notifying their bosses. Then Jimmy receives a call from Rhonda, who reveals D'Angelo's divide from the Barksdale organisation, so the detail swiftly moves to interview him. So, like you were saying, this is the lead-in to the whole federal angle that comes alongside this episode, and them trying to keep it secret, and like you say, that opposite between the real justice, the real principles, and then doing whatever is necessary in order to get your job done, get your task done.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, what did you make of this, Tom?
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't really have too many thoughts on this. I have a few thoughts on kind of the Carver Herc thing, but yeah, like you say, the initiation of that sort of exterior FBI angle is really interesting. Comes into a good fruition later on.
It's just nice to see how receptive Daniels is becoming to McNulty's way of doing things as well. You can tell when he says to him, you are a piece of work, that there's a real begrudging respect there. And he's starting to understand that the levels you need to go to really get things done in the department. So it's just, more Daniels development that really works well.
There is a small liberty taken in this scene for the sake of moving the narrative in terms of, not necessarily realism, but we do have Daniels saying, basically, we need new leads in order for the case to continue, and then moments later they get the call through from Rhonda about D'Angelo, and there's their new lead, straight away.
Yeah.
Kind of this very serendipitous timing.
The bat phone.
And
the camera as well kind of pans almost. Yeah, it kind of pans comically to McNulty. If you watch when he answers the phone, it just goes here we go.
So yeah, it is kind of that. The character says it, and then bang, there it is.
Yeah, the divine intervention was the point there, wasn't it? Really, it was. It's unusual for the wire to go down like that, but it's like they needed something to give.
Are you trying to suggest that David Simon is divine? Because I think he would like that.
He believes that God's over all Baltimore.
On to number 3 then?
Yeah.
McNulty, Bunk and Perlman meet with D'Angelo and his public defender. They discuss a deal based on him admitting his involvement and providing information on the murders. After being shown photos of bodies and a tape recording of Poot discussing Wallace's drug habit over the phone, a guilty D'Angelo talks about the death of Brandon and Deirdre Cresson, as well as how he tried to protect Wallace. He then asks for a fresh start, cursing how his family is involved in the game and he was destined to be part of it too. So this is the sort of D'Angelo interrogation scene, basically. Which is one of my favourite scenes in the whole episode.
Yeah.
I think it's absolutely brilliant.
I think I'd mirror you there.
Yeah.
I think it's also the longest uninterrupted scene in the entire show. I think
it is a very long scene.
It's a good.
Is that right?
Yeah, it's a good 10 minutes. And it's very uncharacteristic of Wire to sort of dwell on anything too long. And this really does take all the time it needs to make its point, and it does so pretty well, I think. There's certainly quite a lot of emotion laced through it. And
I really like how D'Angelo turns over the photos. Like, they hand him the photos and he turns them over as a kind of pushing them away, and Bunk turns them back again. It's kind of ever so slightly at the bottom of the screen. You don't really see it, but it's just a nice little touch.
And the public defender's horror as well.
Yeah. It's like a reminder for the audience
them,
after becoming almost desensitized to all this violence. We have this public defender to remind us that is not normal. That is really dark.
And we've seen these things go down, in horrifying ways. But still, I really I liked here the idea of the institutions of the street and the prison, and kind of the irony of incarceration. Like the fact that D'Angelo's freedom only kind of becomes viable when he's inside. Only then does he not have this fixed horizon of choices, which is kind of a theme that runs through The Wire. But I felt this was communicated really well in this scene. Kind of the hopelessness of his situation was quite distressing.
It's quite incredible how they can take this character that is involved in so much brutality and crime and openly acknowledges the fact that they have walked straight into what they were destined to do, and yet they're so relatable. We really feel their struggle. We really understand when D'Angelo, when he admits his mistake about not trying harder with Wallace to keep him out, we see that he's genuine and we really empathise, and yet that is framed by all of this terrible crime. Yeah, it's a real feat of writing to take that out of a character.
And that directly addresses one of our concerns from the last episode, doesn't it? Whereby we wondered what the hell was going on with D'Angelo's kind of reticence to help Wallace out, and we just see that he was just overwhelmingly trapped by everything, and it makes complete sense. And I think Tom was hinting at it a bit, the idea that the interrogation acts as kind of a mini recap of an overture of the season. It just goes through all the big blow by blows of the main events, starting with Brandon and going forth from there.
We get the witness as well.
Yeah, exactly. About. I mean, it even bookends it with them explaining the rule about talking shop in the car to the detectives, which is like one of the very first scene. I think it's the very first scene on the street in the show. So it kind of
I think you're right.
Completely brings it back. There's a lot of callbacks to that pilot. Really, it's a really, really nice bookend.
Yeah, I remember watching that scene with my dad, who loves The Wire but is not street, and I just remember the music was quite loud in it, and I was just like, oh, he's not going to like this already, you know. But luckily he pulled through, you know. But that is very true. The callback to that is very, very clever.
Definitely. And then we obviously, I guess, one of the big crux of that scene is the big twist when Dee admits he's not the shooter of Deirdre, and there have been hints dropped throughout the season. And you just kind of get Bunk saying refrigerator, and everything becomes clear that Wee-Bey is the mastermind. So yeah,
kind of holding out on the audience, that one as well.
Yeah,
because obviously, you know, we have as the audience have been told the story that D'Angelo told us, and then all this way down the line, it's eventually revealed. Like you say, there have been hints, but the confirmation of that is not until the final episode of the season.
I mean, one of the rare times we're like, you know, genuinely tricked.
Yeah.
But
it's like the scenes like when they have interrogation scenes. The one with D'Angelo, for example, the first one with D'Angelo, where they trick him into Gant and the family and all that sort of stuff. Oh, when I first watched that, I was riding along with it right until the very end, where we see them joking about it, and then it sort of clicks. You're like, oh right, okay.
Definitely.
So it's a nice little moment.
Yeah.
We move on to the next one then.
Yeah, sure.
Yep.
Daniels speaks to Pullman about their progress on the case and then relays the news excitedly to his wife Marla. She seems concerned about Cedric squaring things with Burrell, but he is more interested in taking the case federal and deliberately keeping the deputy in the dark. Not worried about the prospect of it coming back to haunt him. Pullman and McNulty also discuss their success with D'Angelo and plan to take the case federal. Then they have sex in the middle of the police headquarters garage. So yeah, so sort of coalescing of a few scenes there.
And a few bodies.
Yeah.
Yeah. I really enjoyed the sort of differences but similarities of both Daniels and Rhonda. I mean, they're both clearly, like, you know, have a drunkenness towards the case. It's the fact of the police work and how well it's going, and you know what this means that is something that kind of almost like suggests their future relationship. You know, I don't know whether that was intentional or not. What season do they get together again? Is it 2 or 3?
What Daniels and it's 3 they get together.
Is it 3? Yeah. But just kind of that lovely kind of juxtaposition between the stilted jazz and, you know, the dinner on plates, and then you have kind of like backseat shuffle going on, like. And I think we see McNulty fuck someone against a car again, don't we? I think in season 4 on a bonnet or something like. Yeah.
Slightly more tragic circumstances. Yeah, that was just a very drunken escapade. I think we don't really know who the lady is.
Is this the last time that Pullman and McNulty have sex? Is this the last time?
No. Isn't there?
He tries it on again, I'm sure.
She severs the ties mid-season 2. There's a scene where we see them waking up, and she's like too drunk to have sex in the evening, too drunk to fuck in the morning.
She says the worst thing on a woman is a drunken Irishman, I believe is the quote.
That's there we go.
And I think that's kind of why they sort of part ways. Yeah.
Because I think there's a fairly distinct arc to it, because they start off the show as kind of friends of benefits, and then around the beeper pager time, when he comes to find the paperwork, they kind of go on this big off period, and she always grimaces at him, particularly to do with the lawyer stuff with his wife. And then this case kind of launches them back together for a bit, and that lasts until sometime in the middle of season 2, at which point he has to go back and find his wife or make a very desperate attempt to. So it's all there. It's quite subtle, but it's there's definitely kind of ins and outs with them. So
leaning away from the sexual stuff
right
for a second, so we've leaped straight for that, which is fair enough, and into something maybe a little bit more random. When going back to the bit with Daniels on the phone with Pullman and then with his wife. When he's on the phone, there's like this jazz music playing in the background, and then when he puts the phone down, the music ends. And it's almost like he has this kind of soundtrack to his phone conversation, and then it just seems to end for some reason when he puts the phone down. Is that like kind of Daniel's like hold-in music for people or something?
Marla goes to jazz concerts all the time, doesn't she? So
it just seems strange to have it playing whilst the phone's on.
Does that explain that?
yeah.
I just thought it was a strange sort of. Or I heard it, and then the music ended, and I was like, "Is it connected with the phone in some way?" Like,
well, I mean, did it sound like the music was coming from the phone?
No, it sounded like it was in the room. The two ending at the same time.
Oh, okay.
Maybe Marla turns it down when he's sort of closing up the conversation.
I don't know. Wouldn't you turn it down when someone's on the phone and then turn it back up when they're finished?
Yeah, you probably would.
Anyway, that's the arbitrary point for the episode. That's that out the way.
Definitely. It's nice to see, I guess, Pullman and McNulty sitting next to each other in the car after they make the kind of big win, and you get Pullman's take on it is career fucking case, and you can tell that McNulty's smile is just his own pride at having taken down Avon. So they've still got their two kind of lines drawn there, which I thought was quite nice.
And back with the Daniels and Marla stuff, there's the further emphasis on, and kind of Marla stays this way as well, the fact that she's always focused on career and sort of reputations, and she's still kind of hung up on that risk between Daniels and Burrell. She obviously knows all too well about their friction. I think she kind of wants him to follow the career, whereas he's now, branched off a little bit and is actually more interested in making great cases, even if it means making a few enemies along the way. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. A bit of that Daniels development that we were talking about before.
Yeah, it's nice. You can't really, stipulate when certain things happen with Daniels, but there's a very, very gradual shift that's certainly come into shape here, which is really nice.
Right, on to number 5. Mm-hmm. So after earlier assuring Bunk that he would visit Greg's, McNulty takes a trip to the hospital at last and finds the recovering Kima with Cheryl at her bedside. They discuss the case, eventually prompting Cheryl to storm out as she wants Kima to quit, not continue to get more involved. McNulty then gives a tearful apology as he still believes himself partly responsible, but Kima only wishes she'd put more tape on the gun. This is another very touching scene.
Yeah, Dominic West is fantastic in this. I mean, the sadness and his distraught nature is very tangible. Like, I think he's fantastic. He's also great in an earlier scene, which is quite similar to this in the episode, when I think Bunk mentions how Kima is and how we should visit her and stuff like that, and the way he looks at Bunk felt very reminiscent to me of the way Bodie looks at Cutty in season 3 when he mentions James. I'm sure you've both seen that GIF, but just that kind of, that glance, that very soft look, which I think the Wire is so good at that. Those very tender moments of almost nothingness that mean everything, and I think Dominic West is just brilliant in this, and the fact that he's just sitting down, he's got this really sort of hangdog look and his tie, and it's a very touching scene.
That reminds me of when we were talking about the scene between Cheryl and Carver, where he goes to deliver the news, but in the whole scene we don't actually hear them say anything about the actual what's happened to Kima. The whole thing is said in these kind of like soft looks, like you say. It's like you say, it's another technique that's used quite a lot by The Wire, and it does it very well.
Yeah, the temptation for a shot partner in a hospital room to, that's carte blanche for bombast, really. But here it's so reserved. We don't see any of that. I think you said that in the earlier episodes. There isn't really even The Sopranos, for example. There's so many hospital scenes in that show when someone's been shot and everyone's at the bedside. But The Wire kind of does away with that. There's 2 of those in this episode, and then we moved on.
And Cheryl is the one who's upset at the lack of bombast.
Yeah.
She kind of is that viewer who has to run out because there's not enough emotional kind of resonance going on here.
No, she's going to get another card.
Yeah.
Well, you think she's bought all of those cards? I think card after card.
Yeah, that's kind of her outlet, calligraphy.
Cheryl keeps sending me too many cards.
Well, nonetheless, it's certainly kind of a big turning point in their relationship, which has a very, very slow and painful decline.
Oh my god, yeah.
It is quite protracted, isn't it?
Yeah, it's quite subtly done. I remember not really. I remember asking questions about what was really going on in their relationship, because there's not much that's said. But
No.
I mean, the more you watch it, the clearer it becomes that they're different outlooks on the thrill of a chase and the kind of security of a job, and they're completely not made out for each other at all.
No, and potentially the kind of I mean, we don't see it on screen, but oh no, I think I'm thinking this wrong, aren't I? Elijah doesn't come into the scene until later on, does he, in the show?
Elijah is, I think, an adopted kid of Cheryl and her new girlfriend.
Oh, okay.
/ wife.
My bad.
Who? Actually, no. Sorry, you're right. They
They are
use
adopted.
Cheryl. No, it's not adopted. Cheryl's eggs and a donor sperm, I think.
Right.
Is that right?
Okay.
So Kima doesn't have technically any biological relation to the kid, but for all intents and purposes, she is like the mum or the dad, depending on how you want to look at it. And yeah, so she does come along and eventually decides to kind of piece some things together by looking after Elijah. But that is getting ahead, definitely.
Yeah.
We're big fans of season hopping on this show.
Yeah, we are. Sorry.
So.
Well, you are. Yeah.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
It's nice.
Just throwing it out there. Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's what's great about the show, though, isn't it? You're really not isolated by reference of just the season that it's housed within. It doesn't feel, obtuse to go into different directions.
Yeah, absolutely. It's everything's just so connected that you can't really stay grounded at all in this episode. That's why doing a spoiler-free podcast would just be the most restrictive thing in the world when it comes to The Wire.
Yeah.
I don't think I could handle that.
No.
So.
Also, I would like to add that I really like seeing McNulty and Greggs together. I think they're a great double act.
Yeah.
They're kind of good for one another in a way. Kima kind of shares that enthusiasm that McNulty has, but she's a lot more principled and she's a lot more down to earth, and I feel like that helps ground McNulty. So when she's away, when she's obviously in a coma or whatever, it's a time where McNulty does have quite a few moments where he needs to be brought, dragged a bit back down to the ground a little bit, and Kima's a good person to do that, and obviously she's not there. The same is true for Bubbles. Obviously, Bubbles kind of needed her most, and she was away, and we'll talk about that more in the next one. But, but it feels like Greggs is quite a grounding character for some people, and especially McNulty.
Yeah, and it's kind of just on a slightly off point, but still on Greggs. It's weird that Greggs is on the cover of Season 2's DVD.
Is that who it is?
Yeah,
Is that the mystery character?
Because it looks like a sort of Chinese man, doesn't it? It doesn't... I mean, that's no slur against Greggs. Like, she's very, beautiful, but it just... The way it's shot, and it's kind of... You can't see her hair. She's kind of, like, domed.
Nah, is that great? I always assumed that was Prez, if I had to guess.
Well, it's more likely to be Greggs. It is Greggs. It is Greggs.
Okay.
Yeah.
To be fair, I think the DVD cases and artwork and stuff were probably made by people that have never seen the show, because some of the slogans and stuff on there are just rubbish.
Yeah. I couldn't believe when I was rewatching this episode that it was 2002 it came out. 12 years ago.
It was filmed just after 9/11.
Before
season one.
we went to secondary school, that aired.
We weren't even in the last year of secondary school.
No.
It's ridiculous.
No, yeah.
Well, we're a little bit, we're maybe a little bit late, but better late than never. So.
Yeah. I think Crash Team Racing was celebrating its 3rd year anniversary then, so Jesus, that is a while ago. Kind of shoehorn it in.
So I was struggling for the year then, but now I feel it now. I definitely feel it. 2002, got it.
Forget post 9/11. It was post Cortex.
Those wholesome nights.
Yeah. Okay.
Right, should we whack on another chapter?
Yeah. So following on from the previous one, Greggs asks Jimmy to visit Bubbles and deliver some money to help with his fresh start. However, it's revealed that Bubbles is using again, and despite a half-hearted attempt to return some of the money, he can't resist taking it all. Bubs asks Jimmy not to tell Kima what he's doing with it. So we haven't seen much of Bubbles.
No.
For a little while, so this is bringing him back in briefly to just throw a final spit of tragedy in your face before he disappears off again.
And the way that he's... I mean, if you look at his hands during this scene, he's checking that money, counting it, flipping it over, putting it into bowls and stuff. It is like... I mean, Toby, it's tragic. Like, it's a heartbreaking scene. Like, I love Bubble's shirt in this. I mean, I know we're kind of in this really dark area and he's going to buy drugs and stuff. But there's this really nice floral print on it. Like, it's kind of cool. Like, he could be a hipster in a certain way in
Yeah.
2014. Like, obviously less sort of, draggled.
Drug-addled.
But yeah, and just the immediacy of his buy is all the more punishing. You get the feel that off-screen McNulty obviously McNulty knows this deal is just there, and he kind of he's not going to be surprised what's going to happen next.
Yeah, I mean, despite the fact that you don't see any drugs in the scene, it's very, very apparent and not subtle what's going on.
Well, I mean, yeah.
He's
yeah.
So does he actually take all the money in the end?
He does, yeah.
I think
he does.
He does. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does McNulty even know about Bubbles' fresh start, though?
Yeah.
Because that was kind of one of the parts in a previous episode where he gives him money, and, not knowing that Bubbles is trying to go clean. In the episode where we have him sitting on the bench with the really obvious bubbles going across the screen in that kind of meditative moment in the park.
Yeah.
And then we contrast that with him here, and he's like you say, he's checking the money, he seems a bit more agitated, like he's going back to using.
Yep, all the signs are there. So, it's not fun. I mean, we don't see much of Bubbles at all, do we, really, at the end of the season? I think he has one appearance in the montage, but that's all we need, I guess. I mean, the point is he's back where he started. I mean, it's square one again, isn't it? So,
Money be green.
Yeah.
yeah.
We can.
Another season one little, another episode one little nugget.
Mm-hmm.
Right, on to number 7 then.
Yeah.
After a prior meeting with the FBI cautiously set up by Fitzhugh, the detail end up with their case in the first Deputy U.S. Attorney's Office. Freeman explains the Barksdale's property scam, and the FBI say they want to use Avon and Stringer as cooperators to reach the politicians accepting bribes. Daniels ends the meeting, and a disgusted McNulty hits back, hurt that the feds only care about the politicians and not those causing real terror on the streets of Baltimore. So this is McNulty's great empty suits moment. That is, it's very good.
I do love his desperate attempt to connect West Baltimore to terrorism and kind of the truth there is in that to some extent. And it's pretty horrible how it was dismissed as hyperbole, like quite horribly, really. And it was another kind of tragic but very, very logical dead end with Clay Davis suddenly becoming the target. And you get a sense that this bureaucracy always gets in the way of things, no matter where you look.
And we have seen Clay, because obviously I've only just really watched this episode. Have we seen him in the season?
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean the show really puts him up on the stage in the previous episode where he comes in and says, "Look, I'm going to get Burrell to stop Daniels doing all this because you guys are stealing. You guys are putting my money on the line. My money comes from Avon, and I don't want him going down." So I mean, it's made very clear that he is at the end of all these donations. So he's kind of the big baddie right now, and stays that way really.
I think to some extent the show does try to help us sympathise a little bit with the federal level, because in the grand scheme of things, Baltimore is just one city of hundreds. So they're dealing with it on a kind of international level. They're trying to get people who are having political impact in real positions of power. So I guess they're trying to... I mean, it doesn't obviously excuse the fact that they're just allowing this terror to continue. But, you also have to maintain a certain sense of perspective on what it is that these departments are trying to achieve and at what level.
Yeah. I mean, if it's about the money, as it is, then Clay Davis is clearly at the top. But if it's about the murder, then Avon really should be the target. And as The Wire keeps telling us, it's always the money that wins out as the target.
And to some extent, it is these politicians accepting bribes that is facilitating the continued, expansion, and I suppose I could say
it's making
prosperity. That's what I'm looking for.
Yeah,
prosperity of the Barksdale organisation, because they're allowing them to do this stuff with the land, and they get more money, and it gives them a place to clean up the drug money, basically.
Yeah, I mean, instead of being rich gangsters, they're stinkingly rich gangsters because of it. So you're never gonna take their wealth away, but you are gonna take their kind of massive greed potentially away from them if you can lock up these
and certain sources of future legitimacy.
Yeah.
Because we see Stringer get involved in the money game and uses it to essentially clean up the money and become legitimate. But without any of the facilitation going between him and the politicians, there would have been no way for him to make that transfer to the legitimate world with that much capital and that much political and financial capital.
That is very, very true, actually. Yeah.
So on a federal level, they're dealing with it on in that way. I guess because of connections like that. Obviously, it doesn't excuse ignoring the terror, as McNulty puts it, but I think you do have to sympathise in why these departments exist and why they're doing specific things.
You can totally see that they've got this really personal, emotional connection with Avon because they've spent so many weeks just staring at his face on the chalkboard that perhaps their mind is completely blind to the kind of aggregate level.
Yeah.
And we as the viewer can see the benefits of both sides of it. So
how can you possibly fit all of the emotion, all of the struggle and the chasing and the slow gathering of information, everything that those guys in the detail that Freeman and Daniels and McNulty have done, and how can they present that all in one little meeting with these guys from the FBI? I mean, there's just no way that they can understand these people.
Yeah.
So they're just a picture and a name, really, and a list of felonies. That's about it.
Absolutely. It completely sums that up.
Do we see more of the FBI people? Obviously, we see Fitzhugh, but do we see any more of any of the other characters?
Yes.
In those rooms?
Normally, I'm very good with... Yeah, like as far as tertiary characters go, I'm quite good with the names, but there is that one girl. I think it might be Amanda something maybe. She appears quite a few times in the show.
Is that who Perlman has lunch with later?
No, that would be...
that's Eileen Nathan.
Eileen Nathan, yes.
Right,
yeah, she's another of the persecutors, but no, this is one of the FBI kind of heads, and I think her name's Amanda something, but she appears quite a few times on various FBI raids and when they sort of hire the FBI to come in and help them investigate. And then there's also the head of the FBI, or at least some senior member of the FBI who keeps popping up, and I think Carcetti does a deal with him at the start of season 5. So there are a few characters there that do keep recurring, and it's just great how many different departments have these real big arrangements that just stay so constant throughout the show. It's very intricate.
Oh, incredibly so, yeah.
It's another generous connect from Fitzhugh as well.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if he owes Jimmy or the detail something, but he's always very happy to put up these connections with the FBI.
He is, isn't he? He almost needs a spin-off. He would be an interesting character, but it would just kind of a show that laments the bureaucracies of the FBI as opposed to kind of the Baltimore Police Department or something. Like that would be quite interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't have that kind of emotional connect to the street, does it, to the FBI?
No.
But it would be just as interesting, kind of on a...
But it's like an
level.
X-Files tie-in. He starts looking for aliens in Baltimore or something.
Oh, yeah, that could work. And then occasionally he'll get a call from McNulty and drive into a car park, and it'll be like, oh yeah, here we go. Yeah.
You have to wonder what the history is there. If as you say, Fitzhugh really does give him some generous connects that there may have been a lot of arse saving back in the day.
Yeah, I mean, kind of people that we encounter in the show, like Bunny, for example, who have known Jimmy when he was younger, mostly seem to have warmth for him, respect. So we can assume that this is no different, really.
Yeah, I guess not.
And Fitz seems like a good guy.
Yeah, he does. I mean, he's been kind of likable, and I guess we don't really know much about him other than just him being this connect and a sort of past friendship with McNulty.
It's clearly strong enough that he holds no grudge over the empty suits, as they're best buds again by season 2. So,
I should go to number 8.
Yeah.
So Daniels confronts Carver about being a rat for Burrell. Carver's defence is that he couldn't defy the deputy ops based on rank. The lieutenant warns him that his new rank will mean people will be looking up to him and his actions. And this is followed by Daniels returning Prez's service weapon and then leading the detail to Philadelphia, where they make the arrest of Wee-Bey, thanks to a number generated by Roy Brown, an ex-cop and friend of Lester Freeman.
Downtown Roy Brown.
Yeah. So starting off with Daniels talking to Carver. This is obviously quite a big speech, I suppose, for Daniels, talking about if you show loyalty they'll show you loyalty back. You know, that little speech. I feel like it speaks to the leadership structures throughout the whole show, really.
Yeah.
The way that the people at the top behave is guaranteed to be the way that people will behave once they reach those positions, because that's the way they understand the game to be played. They almost feel like it's necessary for their own survival, and once everyone's doing it, it is necessary for the survival. So it is this cyclic nature of the way that you behave influences those below you.
I thought it was very telling how this came immediately after the Brianna D'Angelo lecture.
Yeah.
And the whole concept of the family loyalty connecting them very strongly. And you see that they're both put in massive dilemmas. And so, it's another very deliberate kind of back-to-back thing that they do. But the idea of ratting out to someone else to give up your family, is that something that's morally correct in any situation? So they certainly discuss that quite well. And Carver puts forward a pretty good case. I think that, if Burrell is going to come at you at the top, this big scary man at the top of the chain, what can you really do in that situation?
Very hard to hold it against him, really.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. It's that Daniels is certainly disappointed, but perhaps not quite empathetic enough with him. I'm not too sure, but he does get promoted behind it, which is always...
But he does do another one of his finishing up the lecture by walking to the side of his desk, standing to the side of the person he's been lecturing, saying something gruff and then leaving, which he's done several times now. He's done it to McNulty at least twice.
He clearly went to some sort of be intimidating course, and
Yeah.
that was
Yeah. Just a one day.
Was it the same class with Stringer does his economics for beginners?
Yeah, it's
In the class next door, it's just Daniels going, "Do your job." That's good. Lower, with harsher. Do your job.
And just to sum up what you were saying, really, because it is perfect. Like that cyclical thing can be applied throughout the show. I mean, you look at characters like Bunny or Gus or Frank, and you do really feel that it's kind of like the voice of David Simon coming through. You show them it's about work, then it's about work, and in the next scene, as we move to the court, it literally is the voice of David Simon, as he is the voiceover. Which
No way.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I thought I recognised that voice.
Yeah.
The problem with America.
Well, sorry, it's not. I don't think it's exactly the following scene. I've got it in my notes, but I've kind of done it out of order. No, sorry, the scene after that is Wee-Bey being captured, but
when we have the courthouse scene, it is him doing the introductions.
It is, yeah.
It reminds me a lot of what goes on in season 5 with the paper as well, and the fact that you have these higher ups. They're the ones facilitating certain behaviours towards journalism, and thus that's the game that the journalists will play. Mm-hmm. So I feel like that little speech applies to pretty much every institution in The Wire. It's very sweeping.
Yeah, definitely. And obviously you see this weird coalescing of Daniels and Carver, because they're kind of on the same trajectory but on the generation down. So you can imagine Daniels had this chat back when he was doing his money skims in the Eastern District days, and he's literally regurgitating that same thing to Carver, and they kind of go through this mirrored transition, which is hinted at a lot of times during the show. So, and of course Carver ends up being promoted to lieutenant at the end and kind of completes the Daniel circle. So
the richness of the character development is it's quite marvellous, really. It's quite stunning.
Yeah, definitely.
We also have the arrest of Wee-Bey after this bit. We have the section where they get led out. There is a rather uncharacteristic aerial shot of the city from a helicopter. Normally they're filtered to look like it's coming from a camera on the helicopter in a sort of real-world stance, but this one is almost like a sort of CSI Miami kind of wide, kind of sweeping shot, and it just feels really out of place.
And sort of the Capitol Hill dome just kind of flies in from the left as we sweep past this. But we're in New Jersey, is that right?
We're in Pennsylvania. We're in
Philly.
We're in Philly.
Philly, that's right. Sorry.
See, they didn't technically need an establishing shot, did they?
Did I say Baltimore? I meant Philadelphia.
Yeah.
I think you said Philly. I heard you say Philly. I'm not.
Whatever I said.
We'll listen back to it within the hour.
Yeah.
But
Caught on the Wire.
3 hours. Caught on the Wire.
Do you have a Twitter?
Yeah, so they didn't need this establishing shot. They did mention on a couple of occasions that he was in Philly, but I guess if you just saw Wee-Bey suddenly come out of a house after someone starts whacking a car's glass, it would be quite a leap of deduction to here we are in Philly where Wee-Bey's gone hiding. It's connecting a lot of dots in one go. So,
but potentially it could be a cultural thing. Like, we would recognise Manchester skyline, but maybe for an American audience, the Philadelphia skyline's quite, recognisable.
I don't know.
And it does end on the Philadelphia police car shutting its door.
Yeah.
Yeah. Obviously, Clay Davis called it last episode. He predicted this very event by suggesting that Daniel should be stuck out on a post so far away the Philadelphia cops will be walking towards him. So there's a little bit of a strange bit of foreshadowing.
I just don't know if Wee-Bey would do this. I don't know if he's gone all this way and been so secretive, and then he's just the sign of a smashed window, he's going to jump out. Like, he hasn't really built an affinity towards his cars as he has to his fish either to warrant this kind of like immediate response.
I don't know. They never suggest that Wee-Bey's a careful man. I mean, they suggest that he's a very, very good muscle-up guy, and that he's very effective at carrying out the murders they need. But when it comes to being careful and taking care of the caution side of the business, I mean, it's always Stringer that's managing that.
It's always advice from some other person that's prompting him to do it, whereas I think by himself he would try to carry it because that's the kind of guy that he is, I guess.
And that sort of guy who's so enjoys his violence would completely be riled up by it. Yeah. It's just kind of perfect, isn't it?
Yeah.
All the imagery's there, and the fact that his car is being violated with a pile driver or what do you call them? Crowbars. There we go.
And Carver is taking delight in that. You can really tell that this is
yeah.
He seems a little bit shocked that his first strike doesn't break the window. There's a kind of awkward pause where he's like, "Hiya!" Oh right, crap. Gotta hit it again.
Yeah, but it's the perfect bait for Wee-Bey, who's a man who thrives on violence. So.
I think that about covers it for that one then, unless anyone wants to say any more about Roy Brown, downtown Roy Brown.
No.
Did we ever see him again?
I don't think so. We see Freeman has a couple of these contacts that linger around. There's one in season 5, some guy who finds them a few homeless people.
Oh yeah.
It reminded me of that, just because it's kind of one of Freeman's mystery contacts. But otherwise, I mean, there wasn't a hell of a lot to it, I don't think. It was just a nice way of them being able to locate Wee-Bey, or a shortcut method at least.
Yeah, another sort of push along for the narrative.
Yeah.
Right, number 9 then. Rawls meets with McNulty and congratulates him on the case. He also tells Jimmy that the first deputy US attorney phoned Burrell to complain about Jimmy's behaviour, tipping him off about the detail going behind their back. Then he asks McNulty where he doesn't want to go after the case is done. And this is obviously, again, another pointing to the first episode, where McNulty gets asked where he doesn't want to go.
Yeah, this is one of the ones that, I mean, more people will sort of get. You know what I mean? It's kind of like a nice kind of... Like, it's not obvious. There's no sort of flashback towards it to sort of signal you that way. But it is a real nice... Like, not as subtle as some of the other ones we've discussed today.
Yeah. No, so it's the Rawls chat, right?
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
And, I don't know, I did quite enjoy this scene. We haven't seen Rawls for a long time, particularly up in his office. Again, this was probably an attempt at bringing everything back to episode 1. It was one of the most kind of striking scenes from that episode. And I got a sense here that Rawls is actually probably a very good manager, and I feel like we're led to believe a lot of the time that he's a sack of shit because we constantly see him yelling at the incompetent ones. But for the most part, he probably is a lot more reasonable and very, very effective at his job. And we see glimmers of that through his chats with people like Santangelo and others. But
and that reasonability is... shown through the joke that he has with Landsman. That's what people say about me. It's true, they do.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, the Rawls is definitely a multifaceted character.
He plays nice with McNulty. He plays nice.
Yeah.
But ultimately, because isn't it later revealed in by the time we get to season 2 that McNulty doesn't actually say anything. He doesn't actually tell him. It's Landsman that basically says to Rawls what McNulty said to him.
Yeah. I mean,
I think that's revealed in season 2, possibly in the first episode.
well, I think it's revealed in season 1 really, because in episode 1, McNulty tells Landsman that he doesn't want to go on the boat. You know, he hates the fumes apparently make him feel seasick.
But obviously, Rawls puts the question directly to him.
And McNulty very, very smugly keeps his mouth shut as Freeman informed him. But he found out, Freeman gave him the advice too late, really. He'd already let it slip to Landsman.
Yeah, he'd already told Landsman, yeah.
Yeah, he didn't think Landsman would have it in him to really go and tell the big man. But obviously there's too much loyalty there. And, as you say, there's this bet, I think, that Bunker McNulty have over... Is that right? At the start of season 2 about who told Rawls, and I guess the evidence all there in season 1 if you look closely.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Anything else you want to say about the Rawls bit then?
No, I think you guys have covered it really well as ever.
Right then, so next one. Pullman's lunch is somewhat spoilt when she learns that Levy is now representing D'Angelo. She and Eileen Nathan meet with Levy, where he discusses the limited offers he's willing to give, potentially avoiding the death penalty for Wee-Bey and a short sentence for Avon at a meagre loss of his real estate. And we've mentioned this several times, Tom, but Toby and I have discussed how much we love Levy.
Oh,
I'm assuming you're in the same boat.
Oh, my God. I mean, he's probably the only stereotype in The Wire, really, that I can think of. Like, flat out,
Yeah, it is quite... Yeah, I suppose it is a more obvious one, but it's not played like a stereotype, really.
No. I think he's
he just
deliciously played. He's a great character on screen. And he's such a kind of like, odd contradiction, especially in the earlier scene in this episode when he's in the car park with Avon and String. But he's the power, But yeah, he's
on the one hand he follows all the rules, and yet on the other hand he's right in bed with the criminals.
Yeah.
And he's the the cleverest guy in The Wire potentially. He knows exactly when to play which side of that coin, and that he'll never ever be able to be scathed by it. And he's just so fantastic to watch because he is just this absolute expert of his craft, like almost no one else in the show.
No, that's so true. I would probably say he's probably the smartest character in terms of the way he plays the game.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, him or Johnny.
Oh, God.
Both up
Well,
there.
a kind of savant. He's kind of like a secret genius.
or what's that kid that Bubbles hangs out with that dies? Him as well.
Or Sherrod.
He was a winner.
He could read French algebra. Pretty impressive. Oh dear.
But yeah, that aside, I think the main stuff out of that was just how great Levy is. I mean, the rest of it is just just hear what the likely outcome is going to be for Avon and Wee-Bey.
Yeah, I really liked how
kind of legal proceeding.
I think the opening, I could be wrong, but I think the scene opens with I love the paperwork, or great paperwork, which kind of colours the whole tone of the scene, in that it's going to be entrapped in this kind of administration nightmare that Levy knows exactly how to work, and it's not really about the police work, it's more about the loopholes inherent in the investigation. It's just such a frustrating watch at times, isn't it?
It is. I mean, with the exception of the final episode of the show, you get the sense that Levy has won every argument he enters before it starts. I mean, there's that smugness on his face, and he even completes some of his adversaries' lines for them if they're a bit speechless. I mean, he did that last time. He said the best you can do is 24B. The rest of it, he's absolutely nailed it. And as you say, it's very frustrating, but to the point where you kind of, it's just a begrudging respect right there, because it's just absolutely nailed it for him. So,
right, number 11 then.
Yeah, is this? Are we now onto the street side of things?
Not quite yet. No.
Okay.
There's actually more police stuff than street stuff in this episode.
Right.
So yeah, move on to number 11 then. Pullman undertakes the prosecution against Avon, who pleads guilty in exchange for 7 years, as well as Ronnie Moe, who is presented with 15 years, and D'Angelo, who faces the maximum 20. Stringer returns the compliment given to him by McNulty in episode 1 about being nicely done, and Phelan also offers his congratulations to Jimmy, who is despondent in return. This is our courthouse scene. And you mentioned before we have David Simon himself giving the little introductions at the beginning.
It's a bit of a nugget that I never knew. Because apparently he does have each season he has a cameo, doesn't he? I mean, the season 2 one's obvious because he's kind of that journalist that harasses Frank, and then in season 5 he's literally a member of the office.
We briefly see him, don't we? Pen in mouth.
Yeah, but I didn't. I was trying very hard to spot his season 1 cameo.
Is he not on some sort of judicial panel of some sort? That might be season 3. I'm not sure.
That might be it. I mean, season 3 and 4, I don't really know off the top of my head where he appears, if he does at all. So, yeah,
it's very like Hitchcock, isn't it? He would always have a cameo.
Oh,
in
yeah.
His own creations, and yeah, I'm pretty sure I saw Chris Nolan on Asteroid in Interstellar. So, similar concept, you know.
Oh god.
There is everything does feel like it comes full circle with this courtroom scene. Obviously, we're reminded of the first one with D'Angelo about Gant, and we have the nicely done coming back again.
Yeah.
We have the
D'Angelo's
following
at the
conversation with Phelan, which has a completely different tone. It's much more brief, much more clear what the characters think of each other.
And you have I think during this scene, Daniels sees Major Cantrell again, doesn't he? As a major.
I was going to put that up later on as well.
Oh, okay, sure, yeah.
That's another minor arc I'll look at later.
Sure. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of callbacks, and I'm sure we'll come up with lots more of them. But yeah, as you say, this courtroom is kind of the combination of it. And you get 2 D'Angelo-centric courtrooms, or court procedures. And there's all sorts of mirrorings going on.
I think I mentioned it in the very first episode. So I'll do a meta wire act and do another callback to that. We don't see any more of Stringer's little courtroom doodlings, and we never see that again. I thought that was a skill that was brought up and just never used again. It would have been nice if they'd at least brought it out again for this scene. And he draws,
Yeah, is it a superhero that he?
And it says "fuck you, detective."
Yeah.
And we never see that again. I mean, it's kind of revealed right in this first episode, almost as if it's important that Stringer has this ability to draw funny little doodles, and then we never see it ever again.
And it's like the guy works in a copy store where there's surplus paper to practice on. Always, like, come on, String. Yeah.
No,
it would probably just detract, wouldn't it? It's kind of like, it's not going to be.
I always felt that doodle was a bit below Stringer. Like it kind of felt a bit juvenile for him.
He doesn't have that sense of humour, does he?
No, I think it was clearly one of those toothing, growing issues that the show has, where you haven't quite defined the character yet, and perhaps they decided to let that one lie, and just as a little mistake that we won't bring back up.
Who knows? There may be some great artwork stuffed behind the desk or something in the office where he counts his money,
That's what they use their safe for.
Yeah.
He just does the little doodles on the notes themselves. He sneaks a doodled note into every pack. Where
he's
it's
a crafty gangster, isn't he, String?
Yeah.
The B&B signature, yeah. Oh dear. So it was pretty. And obviously, I guess one of the other big callbacks is the final 2 lines of the episode with the very, very forced use of our favourite catchphrases.
Yeah, it's 2 more uses and the horrible slow-mo as well. That's in the final courtroom scene as well.
They use slow-mo 2 or 3 times in this episode.
They do, with the bats.
Yeah.
It gets thrown and it just kind of hits his hand. It's really like Zack Schneider-y. It's really weird.
Yeah, it's not. I really don't like it.
No.
It's the catchphrasing. And I understand that McNulty's, what the fuck did I do is meant to represent. It's meant to be sort of tragic rather than comedy, and it's showing us about the fact that it is built up into this big mess and it's not turned out the way that he expected. And I just feel like there are much better ways of presenting that than a really cheesy catchphrase that we hear far too many times.
Yeah, it kind of felt like,
especially when Bunk follows up with the typical response, like It's just like, yes, we've got it. Aren't they a dynamic duo?
Yeah.
It's almost like because they established these, they have to pay them off at the end. Otherwise, it's a string that's left kind of untied. And
I want that one untied. Mm-hmm. It's my axe to grind in this season.
It's certainly very jarring in the first few episodes, as we were discussing. Yeah,
you feel more content. You feel more into the show. You feel like it's found its feet, and then it just throws that at you again. It's just a bit disappointing, really. But, I guess, like you say, it is this the first season finding its feet and maybe experimenting in a couple of places.
Definitely.
Just, I don't think it works in this instance.
Nope. I would agree with you there, sir.
Right, so number 12 then?
Yeah, sure.
So Wee-Bey is interviewed by Bunk, Norris and Eileen Nathan, and despite refusing to give up Avon or Stringer, he does confess the murders of Little Man, Nikisha Lyles and William Gant, the last of which Bunk and McNulty discuss as a false confession at the courthouse. And then we have, obviously, McNulty following up with the what the fuck did I do?
Yeah, this is... I love this scene. It reminded me a lot of... Is it the opening of Season 5 when they're using the McDonald's to kind of get, the confessions out of the characters through the food? I don't know if this is just a wide thing in the police department overall, but I really like the kind of method that they go through here. And the fact that sort of... what does Wee-Bey ask for? He asked for, like, sort of horseradish or something.
Staying true to his horseradish fetish.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a fetish. I don't think it ever goes that far.
Stringer drew him with it. It's weird.
Again, I've got the unrated version, so you might have to come and watch it.
That must be that's pricey. Yeah. But it's quite evident when you watch a scene, but the nonchalance to which he kind of admits these murders is kind of like... And when they even kind of like raise the prospect of maybe talking about Stringer, where it's like, nah. And there's nothing else
I thought it was really
said.
funny the way he just goes, nah.
Yeah.
I thought that was really funny. Murder ain't no thing.
Yeah. I love Wee-Bey.
Yeah,
I think he's great. I think
very bold.
Yeah, he's just really well played. Like some of the other sort of Barksdale soldiers, like Stinkham, and who else am I missing? There's another one, isn't there? Davino. Is it Savino?
Savino,
yeah. They're kind of more just stock whatevers, but no, Wee-Bey's like played really well. I think the actor's great. And even when you see him in the yard later with who's he in there with?
It's Partlow he chats to,
It is Partlow that he chats to, yeah. That's... Oh, I love that.
It's too tempting, isn't it, to jump forward to the end of the show, but I know what you mean.
How my hair look? Spoiler.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Very cryptic one, though.
Yeah. So there's two more... Well, there's a couple more little ones at the end, a couple more very small arcs. The first one that you briefly mentioned already, Toby, we have Daniels bumping into Cantrell, who is now a major. And obviously we see that Daniels is bumping into the job that he could have had, basically, if he'd towed the line.
Yeah, if he hadn't made this McNulty transition throughout the season.
Well, it's not. He doesn't quite go. He doesn't go full McNulty. You never go full McNulty.
But he kind of builds off of McNulty's energy or defiance for authority. We'll go with. So, and yeah, as you say, I mean, all these chats with Burrell have led somewhere. And although he may have left the Burrell chats kind of winning on a who's got the quippiest tongue, we're reminded that Burrell kind of has that ability to crap on whoever's below him, and here's what he's done.
And
it's even dangled in front of him.
Yeah,
carry on.
Sorry, I was just saying. I mean, I don't know if you guys noticing that scene, but when you're a major, you wear a hat that says major on it. Yeah. It's quite weird. Like, it's quite distracting. Like,
I think lieutenant is too long to fit on the badge.
Yeah.
Maybe, I don't know.
It's just, I don't know, it's just a kind of interesting, but I always think power and the way someone looks when they're in a position of power in The Wire is always done very well. And in this scene especially, Daniels is just kind of wearing a traditional kind of, attorney sort of brown suit, whatever, but is it Cantrell?
Yeah.
He has this sort of little golden reefs even on the cap of the hat. There's something very ordained almost about it. It's really well put together.
Yeah, absolutely. And then we also see how several other members of the detail have moved along. So we have Herc talking to two of his new detectives about using your head to make cases, which seems a little bit of an oxymoron in terms of Herc. We have Freeman being introduced to homicide by Rawls, and we have Carver being promoted. So we have the trio moving on.
Yeah. So it's odd seeing Herc take that position, but I guess it serves more as another bookend for the season more than anything else.
It seems like he's parroting it, though.
Yeah.
I don't think he's being genuine. He just wants to appear smart. But he's just going to do what he doesn't learn anything. That's the whole point.
Yeah, and it's Daniels' smile that says it all, really. And it's just not. I guess they're taking us back to the narcotics office, which we haven't really seen since the first episode, since everyone was shipped out. So it's just putting us back in the square one position. And then there's the Carver promotion.
I mean, that's actually part of the montage at the end.
Yeah, but I mean, there's some pretty sinister snitching-based promotions going on. This is despite being outscored by Herc on the exam, which is hard to believe, but it did happen. And I think Herc was damaged a bit by his brutality record, is that right?
Yeah.
So there's a few things at play for each of them. But when it comes down to the snitching, Carver clearly got in with Burrell and managed to score himself a little one-up on Herc.
And we get that demonstration of how if you do toe the line in that sense, even if it is somewhat involuntary, it does show that it pays off, but also what the costs are in terms of, looking at yourself in a mirror in the morning.
Yeah.
Knowing what you've done.
Absolutely. And I guess we can always compare this to the first scene of the episode where Herc is asking him to kiss the stripes because he's convinced he's the one that's destined for that promotion.
Yeah.
And how the tables turn.
I always love the way Carver wears his badge in that initial scene. Like, I don't know if you've noticed, it's like a diamond. Like, it's almost like a sort of superhero chess piece. Like, and he wears it quite a few times like that. It's quite nice.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, you're so right. The look that Carver and Burrell share, that really intense glance, is wonderful. That sort of steadying the hand as you kind of salute. Yeah, it's great.
There's clearly more to this promotion than normal. The normal kind of formality, in that look, isn't it? Yeah. And obviously we know that he's kind of getting assigned to the southeast under Valchek, and he'll be in command of one of the patrol shifts as is it a captain or something like that? Yeah, captain, right? I assume so. Probably.
Who's that?
Carver. So
Carver. He won't be a captain yet. Well, I thought he was a lieutenant.
No, lieutenant. He becomes a lieutenant at the end. At the end of the show, isn't he? I think captain's lower than lieutenant in the police.
So isn't he a sergeant?
That's it.
That's what he was going to become,
he's
wasn't
a sergeant. Yeah, there we go. Sergeant's exam. Yep. Nicely corrected.
I think that's all the little bits. That's kind of the end of the police. Mm-hmm. So now we'll move into look into the stuff on the street. More detail if you're ready.
Yeah, let's go.
Okay, so our first one is Avon and Stringer meet with Levy in a car park, and the lawyer says that he suspects a wire of some kind as the confidential source for the police. Avon realised his mistake about talking to Dee about the drug run in the club office, and Stringer insists that they bail out their people to avoid making enemies. Avon also believes that they needn't worry about D'Angelo as he is family. There are some very interesting visual choices in this scene.
Yeah.
Most notably the fact that you start off with this big stretched out view down the car park, with them kind of doing this long walk towards the camera that they never quite finish. And then when they stop, there's almost like a fisheye lens effects, and they feel pressed up against the camera.
Yeah.
You feel kind of squeezed in amongst these three guys having this really intense sort of quiet conversation. It's a very interesting choice of visuals.
And Stringer's head is sort of cocked to the right, so it really fills the frame. It's not kind of like a full-on stance. It's very interrogative of the shape. And I love Avon's sort of tennis Rocco wear sort of get up. It's fantastic. And you see, it really puts it in a certain era, because Rocco wear, which is Jay-Z's fashion label, which was huge in that era, that sort of early 2000s. You see Poot wear a Rockaware shirt later in the episode, actually. It really kind of places it in that certain, time frame. It's a really nice choice. And also, similarly to how you see the car park, as you're saying, the sort of the imposing structure. I really like when they get out of central booking, and you just sort of see, it's very plainly sort of demonstrated there, but they're very small in comparison to this huge white block that they've just freed each other from. Don't they pay is it $250 they have to pay?
They paid quarter of a mil, but it hurts them not
to
because
even
of the
show
money.
that money, yeah.
It hurts because they have to show it,
exactly.
rather than the fact that they have to spend it. So it's very, very telling of kind of what these guys are about. It's kind of sickening.
Didn't we speak? I think we spoke ages ago about how much they're worth. How much are they worth, roughly?
They speak about it in season 1 a few episodes back.
Right.
They're making, is it 60 million a year or something like that? Something ridiculous, or
more
than that. I mean, with all their property, there's no telling how much money really accumulates.
And those box set sales. Jeez.
I have a feeling that $2 million a month is what's thrown around. I could be wrong.
Wow,
I have a feeling that's what they said.
That
It does seem like a lot, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And then Stringer actually suggests that they show even more money in order to bail people out.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't want them to make enemies. They just leave people around, and they're going to end up with the whole organisation left with no one to trust because they won't bail anybody out.
Yeah.
They don't want to cripple themselves. They want to. Stringer, especially, is very focused on getting back in business.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely. I guess there's nothing incriminating about them showing that money, but I guess it certainly does raise eyebrows if people are looking like McNulty. And it's nice to see that Stringer's already got the business mind whirring. This was kind of his learning season. He hasn't quite stepped into the fold yet. I love that final shot of Stringer at the end of the montage, and you can kind of see it written all over his face that he's going to revolutionise the way they do business, and completely, ratchet up the kind of business element of it and make it a lot more capital heavy.
Yeah, he's just at his desk, isn't he? Sort of.
Yeah.
Gives me a weird optimism for the running of the organisation. I can't quite explain it because obviously it is quite sinister and they do a lot of horrible things, but at the same time you're almost like, I would like to see how it's going to be run now.
There's something about
even
the way
though there's murder and
exactly. It seems like a stupid thing to say, but
I completely
can't
get
help but
you.
point it out.
It certainly sets a nice bit of a cliffhanger. I mean, the way he breaks the fourth wall, there's something so kind of chilling about it, and I don't think it ever happens again. I mean, he stares straight at the lens.
Yeah, it's just like the synergy of the organisation with emphasis on sin.
Yeah,
definitely.
But you are completely right. He just looks you straight on. It's kind of
and
like,
Avon is so wrong
want to do
about
business?
D'Angelo as well.
Yeah.
Avon is very wrong about D'Angelo, saying that he's family. We don't need to worry about him. It seems a bit of an outmoded concept coming from him, and we can see that in reality, perhaps D'Angelo really does want to cut ties.
Some institutions are fallible.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's one of the major themes of The Wire in general, but it's especially thrown about in this show, is the faith that people place in institutions. And that's one of the things that D'Angelo did. He put faith in this kind of institution of the family around the Barksdale organisation. And they failed him big time. They dropped him right in it, and it doesn't seem like any apology that Avon can offer is going to be worth it.
Yeah.
It's already made him cynical towards the notion, and although there is a slight slip, and obviously we have the bit with Levy, we do find out later on that desire to cut ties and start afresh very much stays with D'Angelo right until the end. Yeah.
I'll quickly talk about the Levy stuff again. I mean, Levy pops up again in this scene, but it's just he's completely on point again, and they instantly nail down the Wire in the room. They eliminate all other possibilities. And Stringer kind of assumes that they've had it up there for a lot longer than they have, so that they are being overcautious again as always. But they then mention the structured plea idea, isn't it? Which I assume is a very posh word for Wee-Bey taking all the murders. I don't quite know why it's called a structured plea, but it makes so much sense that it works in this broken city that they've kind of set up for us. with both sides of the law profiting from it. I mean, that the stats go up and Barksdale loses less personnel or fewer personnel. So it's kind of completely ingrained into the city that this is the approach they go for. And
doesn't he say that it's giving all their people up in order to reduce the individual impact on Avon?
I think no, you got to deliver all your people down to one man. And I think people is lawyer talk for cadaver or someone you've killed.
Oh.
And
Okay.
I assume that's them saying you've got to find one man to pin all your murders to. And since Wee-Bey's already got life for killing Greg's, they may as well use him.
Mm-hmm. And he seems quite happy to do it.
Well, shooting
He
Greg's.
almost takes us. Seems to take a certain. He seems to revel in it.
Yeah. It kind of takes all this pride in all this destruction that he's caused.
Yeah.
But doesn't he want potato salad? But they've got coleslaw. I mean, you kind of feel for the old murderer, don't you? You're just like,
Isn't he, is it strawberry soda he wants as well? It's just
probably.
Yeah, something.
I don't know why I'm saying probably, but
Yeah. Should we move on to number 16?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Avon and Stringer relocate to the funeral home, and despite his initial doubts, Avon seems happy with it, especially after seeing the pallbearers playing dice in the alley outside. Stringer still seems concerned about listening devices, and so they both go outside to speak with Brianna about moving forward and making it up to D'Angelo.
Yeah, I mean, my first thought when I was watching this scene was the best Wire trivia question ever is what is the name of the funeral parlour?
Oh man, I must confess I don't know.
Yeah, it's not. It's in frame for a little bit. I wrote it down. It's Carleton C. Tompkins Funeral Services, whatever. And I was also saying to Toby yesterday, when you go in, there's a really lovely moment when they enter the funeral parlour for the first time when someone is picking caskets for a service in the bottom left of the screen. And it looks a lot like Slim Charles from behind. Like it's a very tall man with braids and stuff. But you hear as the scene ends, you can hear his voice, and he says something like "I want mahogany" or something. But it's a very kind of much higher voice,
Okay,
I would like to hear Slim Charles say the word mahogany, though. I think that would be delightful.
Mahogany.
And also, when they have their little discussion outside the Carleton C. Tompkins, just going to say it again to commit it to memory. Brianna's use of Mos Def I find very distracting. Don't you think the way she ends this really important scene and just
feels a little disingenuous?
Not even disingenuous. It just feels a little bit like I mean, The Wire's all about slang, and I love it, and I think it's used incredibly well. But there's just something about her use of that word that she could have just said yes. It kind of I don't know. Maybe it's just me. Just rewatch it. Rewatch it.
Why don't you people just say selling drugs instead of slinging? Everything has to be slinging that and fucking this.
Oh dear, it's just a D'Angelo family trait, isn't it?
Stop trying to middle up The Wire.
You're ruining it.
Yeah.
This isn't what it's about. It's about Stringer's drawings.
Oh dear. I'm gonna need to go and rewatch that. I need to go and see Wee-Bey's Nah. And
there's a lot of little moments
that I completely kind of skipped over in my mind. So I need to re-engage. It's strange that you say you saw Slim Charles lookalike, because mine came along but at a different stage in the episode. Also in the funeral parlour, so maybe they're connected. But
they're not hiding behind a cupboard in the scene where they were in it's just his braids sticking out of the top or something.
You can see his reflections in Stringer's eyes when they zoom in.
No, because just when I first watched it, I mean, I haven't just watched the show in a while, and I just didn't know whether the parlour was already kind of associated with those people. But where did you see him?
Right in the montage. There's four guys in the Stringer scene of the montage. There's Stringer himself, the guy who's counting the money, the huge heavy that they have as their kind of. I think he stays throughout the whole show.
I know you mean. Yeah.
And then there's a guy who's doing a drop, like a money drop, and that is lit. As far as I'm concerned, that's pretty much Slim Charles in a nutshell, right there.
Slim Charles.
Is that a cross between Slim Charles and Adrian Charles?
Yeah,
yeah, I said Slim Charles. No, that really
just
kind of
gangster pundit.
And non-street spin
Stash
on
of a day.
Yeah.
I really want to see Slim Charles on the One Show now.
Yeah.
We just got to go on the Atkins and sort him out. But
I think he
yeah,
got
it's-
stabbed recently, didn't he? Or shot, Slim Charles.
What, Adrian Charles on the One Show?
I saw him on Match Today last night. He looked okay.
But yeah, no, I think you are right. I think I did see that about Slim Charles.
Yeah.
I don't really know what the follow-up was, but
No.
that was quite recently, actually. It was only about a month ago or something, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was quite.
Damn,
quite
I did not realise that. So,
Yeah, outside the nightclub or something.
I guess we'll talk about just the funeral home in general because it is such an important place for the show. It's the first time we see it. I think we've heard of it as one of their properties that the police have got their mitts on, or at least discovered. But it is, it's got some of the show's best conversations are held within it, including our resident guest's favourite scene in the whole show. And it's an absolute base of operations that I'm always happy to see. So.
Is it also the one where in season 2 when they have to sort of hold the floor and Stringer confronts Bodie?
Yes, it's also in there. Yeah,
Okay.
Right in the kind of chapel bit at the front.
Yeah, it's a fantastic setting. Yeah,
It's a beautiful place, and it's interesting that both Barksdale and the Detail kind of had temporary starting offices, Orlando's and then City Hall basement, and both of them kind of moved on to bigger, more long-term places for the second season. Obviously, that famous abandoned building by the docks that the Detail move on to, and there's also kind of a funeral going on while they scout the place out, and they just have no time to pay their respects. They're quiet, but not because of their respects, just because of their paranoia.
Yeah.
So they're just kind of
That's a good point.
glancing over the death and thinking about the business.
In fact, doesn't Avon say something like, "Oh, this place is too still"?
Avon's not a fan, but Stringer sees the potential straight away, which is interesting, kind of for the rest of the show.
Yeah.
I guess the other part of this scene is that we also have our first mention of Roberto, who I find a very confusing arc, or the source of a very confusing arc. Next episode, where he becomes kind of the focus of their loss of the drugs and the rise of Prop Joe into the towers. He's a very important seed, but we never see him, and they kind of launch him right at the end of season 1, very subtly. So he is their supply from New York, who got shit scared by the big police investigation, or I think the hunt from a couple of episodes ago, and severs the ties with them. And it's now on to them to find a new supply, and they eventually get in with Prop Joe's supply off the boat. I think that's how it goes, isn't it? So I thought it was worth mentioning that, and how he becomes an important part of the setup of the New Day Co-op.
Yeah, well, leading on into season 2, of course.
Yeah, directly, really.
Right, let's move. Should we go on to 17? Unless anyone wants to add any more about the funeral home.
No, I think that's all good.
All right, so Stringer brings the organisation back in business with a new product and gets the lieutenants to spread the word. In the pit, Bodie leads the charge to chase off an independent crew trying to set up on their turf, and Herc and Carver look on as the pit crew give the opportunists a beating. So this is a Barksdale organisation coming back in, and we see that new product where it's like cut with something or other, baking soda or whatever it is. And
I don't know if it was a little bit too on the nose maybe in the comparisons, but I quite like the fact that Stringer works in the copy shop. He's showing the character and by proxy the audience how to make copies of the drug, as opposed to kind of the actual real, product.
right, yeah, that's true. Actually, yeah, I didn't pick up on that at the time, but yeah, it's a good parallel.
Yeah.
But they do have that very kind of very forced moment where they're trying to make it clear what's happening, and that guy on the other side of the counter is like, "Yeah, 10 cuts."
Yeah, it ain't like a speakeasy, is it? It's just like Yeah.
I'm surprised he didn't wink like really hard.
Yeah.
Or make a sort of hand movement.
Yeah, it's another welcome I love Stringer's Copy Shop, as we mentioned earlier. Like, I just think it's kind of like, it makes sense, doesn't it? It's kind of like, especially just as a front, it's like, there's always going to be busy, it's always going to be a lot of turnover.
Yeah, it is must be a very effective front. I mean, I don't know how much genuine business they do. It's hard to tell. Do we actually ever see any genuine customers in the photocopying place?
I assume that they have these couple of guys that they employ, and whenever someone who's not there for legitimate business comes in, Stringer always takes over. I'll handle this, or whatever. So I assume that they do a fair bit of legitimate printing. I don't know if the
I'd like to think so.
Yeah, you'd hope so. I don't know if the printing coincides well with their business, so they're able to benefit. I mean, I know that Prop Joe likes to print off police reports, but I don't think Stringer quite goes to that level. So it's just literally a front.
And then we have the independent crew trying to set up on the pit turf, because obviously they're reckoning that Barksdales don't have any product. And then Bodie makes it very clear that it isn't a free market, and that whoever has the bat wins, basically.
Yeah. We have another slow-mo moment right here.
Yeah, we do.
Bodie
trying to make them badass with the slow-mo bat-catching movement, mate.
It's so unwire. Like, why are they trying to really hype up these guys?
Badass mode engaged. It's just a bit
Look at their bats. It's like we're in the 20s. Like, you know.
Most of the time people use bats on the wire, it's really obvious that they're like foam bats as well, because you can see them kind of retorting in a really unnatural way. So I remember there's that one where Bubbles sees a beating, and it looks horribly faked. But there we are. That's the problem with bats in the wire. They're never quite legit enough.
What's the deal with bats? And then Herc and Carver kind of gives an addition to his first episode quote about war's end, and now we have, when they fuck up they get beaten, when we fuck up they give us pensions, and that kind of had me thinking back to Mahone, and how he just did his little trip down the stairs, pension sorted.
Well, it is pension already. This just boosted it a hell of a lot. Rewarding absolute incompetence. So it feels a bit beyond Carver, but we know that he's a closet philosopher, so it's all fine.
What, Carver?
Well, but since he, stuck his claim by telling us about wars not ending, I guess I'm willing to believe that he's got this level of insight. But
right. I think it needs some work.
Yeah.
But anyway, number 18. Brianna visits Dee in prison, and tries to bring him back on side, tempting him with the chance to take over from Avon. D'Angelo declines, saying he doesn't think he'll ever be ready for it. Brianna then claims that hurting Avon will hurt the whole family, and that the game is what stopped them from all being destitute in the first place. Without it, she thinks her son will have trouble making a fresh start. What do you think of the relationship between Brianna and D'Angelo? Because we don't see all that much of it, really. It's introduced quite late in the season. Do you think it's developed nicely?
Fairly so. You can always tell that there's a massive disparity between how she thinks D'Angelo, thinks of her, and the way he actually thinks of her. There's a massive kind of leap there, or chasm between them, that Brianna just isn't aware of. She does put forward a very convincing point about the living off scraps.
Yeah.
It really, really does make both sides of the argument appear very convincing. And it would put anyone into a bit of a moral quandary once that was laid on the table.
No doubt, and I mean, you don't quite know. I mean, Avon and Stringer have been rolling together for a long time, and you question whether sort of Dee, even as a child, is almost institutionalised into this, which kind of makes it even more dark. He wasn't kind of, drawn in, say, like a Michael was. He was just, his uncle was Avon.
We have guaranteed inclusion, wasn't it?
And I think we said this before between ourselves, but it is quite striking how much Brianna and D'Angelo look alike.
Yeah, they really do.
Like they both
Yeah.
they both have that certain kind of like, I don't want to say
Props
goofy.
to the casting department, I guess.
Yeah. But they do have a great, you know, like they look very alike.
But I think that it would be nice if they really went into the parenting, because clearly it must have been Brianna that sheltered D'Angelo and made sure that, you know, that made him grow up with some shred of empathy for other humans, unlike a lot of those people around him, because he really isn't cut from the same jib as anyone else in the low rises by the looks of things, and it's clearly the nurture that creates that sort of thing, and I can't really see it in Brianna that would make him so different. So it would be nice to have an insight into that, perhaps.
Well, that's what I was thinking, because, like I say, the relationship between them was introduced quite late, and thus far we get a sense that she would have been key in bringing him into that world and making him believe about the strength of family, and he doesn't really seem to exhibit any of those qualities at all. He seems very much, you know, completely counter to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Because there's that one scene in season 2, I think, towards his death, where she talks about how there was one scene where he was too afraid to fight the kids outside, so she locked him out the house and made him face his foes. Literally forced him to fight, or to learn to fight, or take a beating, which doesn't sound like the sort of upbringing that would develop a D'Angelo. But yeah, it's a difficult one. They certainly make some attempts at it, at defining this relationship, and I kind of agree with you, Alex, that I'm not sure it's ever quite solidified in a satisfying way.
Some very questionable parenting, leaving your child outside to get beaten up.
I brought you into this world, but you're the one that's going to have to live in it. That seems to be the quote that I remember from the...
Yeah, it definitely isn't Naaman and Mrs. Wee-Bey, whatever her name is.
No, that's more shelter.
Yeah.
And you can understand perhaps someone with a bit of empathy coming out of that family, but yeah, definitely.
With his Halo 2 game that says Halo 2 on the screen. It's really weird, that is.
Maybe it was the demo, and the demo perhaps just said the.
I distinctly remember the demo being logo free. Distinctly.
They signed some kind of deal with Microsoft or Bungie to promote the game through the show, but only if they could print the logo on it to make sure people knew what it was.
They totally should have just put the box standing up against the telly.
They should have done a montage, but with the Halo theme. Dun, 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 and it's like them all about the streets. That would have been fantastic.
You should do that, man.
Yeah, after you've done that battle rap one, that's the follow up. I know they're not contiguous at all, other than The Wire. But
no, yeah, well, yeah, maybe. I think
New
that
project.
might be more you, man. I think you did. What was it? What was the game you did? Sorry, we're getting off topic now.
Oh god.
But, yeah.
You're going to bring up the Imperial Guard song.
I watched that actually quite recently.
Really?
Yeah, man. I always love going on it and checking the comments, because it's always cool, because people are always commenting it like really recently. Like, that's what's really cool. People are like, oh, I love this, and it's got like 100 upvotes just as, I love this.
Yeah, it's quite a bizarrely popular video. To this day, I don't really understand it.
I searched for it on forums as well, and people were like talking about it on like Skyrim forums and shit. And yeah, it's cool, man.
It's been mentioned on Reddit.
Yeah. You have made a genuine contribution to that culture. Like, that's really cool. Anyway, I'll stop blowing you. Let's move on with The Wire. Yeah.
Yeah, save it. Save it for when the recording's off.
Yeah.
Right, shall we go to number 19 then?
Yeah.
So Bodie and Poot take over in the pit, with Bodie complaining about his new subordinate's slowness, and Poot delivering the lesson he learnt from D'Angelo about keeping cash and products separate to a new hopper. So a continuation of the lessons learnt.
Although Bodie doesn't take over in the pit, Bodie gets promoted to the towers, right?
Oh, towers, sorry, yeah.
He takes Ronnie Moe's position, and we finally get to see Ronnie Moe, who is involved with the conspiracy and gets arrested. And we then have to assume that his work with Wallace got him the job up in the tower. And And yeah, you see that he's already kind of cut from the right management jib, and he's really controlling things well up in the tower. And you don't get that sense as confidently with Poot, but it's nice to see again another massive bookend with the lesson in how to serve a customer, almost directly ripped from D'Angelo's mouth, right down to the tightening shit up around here, yo. So.
Yeah, just a continuation of. And why it does that in several different places for several different characters, and how, the more things change, the more they stay the same.
Now with KFC rather than chicken nuggets, but
yeah,
it's kind of a nice little callback as well.
Yeah. Oh, of course, yeah. Very good point.
Yeah, it's good. And sorry, you were going to add?
No.
Else?
I completely agree with you with Bodie's control in the towers. He's similar to how Carver's been promoted. He's been promoted into that same way, and he's really adapted to his surroundings. And I love the way the scene ends with sort of Bodie looking up, and then we cut to the kind of like the brutality of the city towers.
When you say brutality, you mean how brutally bad the CGI is?
Yeah.
Sorry, I've just got it on screen.
Not of that tower that he's looking up, I don't think, but there is still several more shots of those really weird kind of almost watercoloured towers in the background.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
Well, the actual towers they use...
I keep bringing it up, but...
Yeah. It's the first time we've seen them since the first couple of episodes, I think, so again, it's another form of bookending when we get the CGI towers back. But the towers they film, or the towers they're meant to film at, when you see scenes at the towers, such as the Brother Mouzone ones and the one here with Bodie, those aren't actually towers, because I don't think there's any left in West Baltimore. But they keep the camera at a low angle, so you can't see how tall the buildings actually are. But at least, the buildings themselves look kind of tower-esque, or have the potential to be quite tall, so they just use those. But yeah, the towers literally are all CGI'd straight into the frame.
All right,
the ones
never realised that.
Yeah, they were knocked down before the filming started, weren't they?
And obviously with Season 1 they wanted to kind of call back to times in the 80s, I think, when they were dealing with pager-based crime. And back then all the towers were still up, and they were causing big hives of drug pockets and addicts and dealers and all the rest of it. So yeah.
And then in Season 3 they actually have the towers being brought down.
Yeah, so it kind of goes back through the history a few years too late almost, yeah.
Right, well that brings us to the final montage, in which we see quite a few things. Obviously, another rare moment for The Wire. We have a montage in every finale, but The Wire in general, it's a bit of an unusual moment to have an underscore to a montage. So we see, amongst many things, Bubbles and Johnny back on the hustle, and Santangelo on patrol in the Western District. Burrell promoting Carver. Prez clearing the detail board. Greg's gazing wistfully at a car chase from her window, or the hospital window.
Yeah.
And we have Freeman and Bunk visiting McNulty at the Marine unit and giving him a bottle of whiskey. Stringer overseeing the counting of his profits, and we have that moment that you talked about earlier, Toby, where he's sort of almost breaking the fourth wall with the look on his face. And then we have a lot of drugs being distributed and taken throughout the whole of Baltimore, and eventually we find ourselves with Omar, who holds up another dealer, this time quite pointedly a white dealer in a more white neighbourhood, presumably calling us to Season 2, and holding him up and telling him that it's all in the game. So a big flurry of activity in that montage.
Yeah. Well, Omar's actually in kind of a Spanish neighbourhood in the Bronx in New York.
Yeah.
You see the Empire State Building in the background, and then very, very pointedly they have South Bronx kind of plastered onto one of the warehouses.
Yeah.
Which I guess is just shortcuts again, shorthand. But I guess he was true to his word and found a bigger town that he could terrorise.
Yeah.
Yeah, I also really liked when Bubbles and Johnny are going for the copper piping on top of the van. Like, the way it plays and the way it's shot is almost like a sort of comedy. It's kind of like they're bumbling along, a cop comes into shot, they filter off, and then What's the name of the cop? It's not Ray Cole, is it? It's
Santangelo.
Santangelo, yeah. His baton spinning is second to none. It is really nice to watch. And I have to say, I think out of all of the montages, this song, Jesse Winchester's Step by Step, is probably my favourite montage song. I think it's fantastic.
Excellent. Yeah, it is a good song.
And it kind of almost anticipates that kind of bluesy bar music that dominates season 2, you know. But to be fair though, I think all the montages are quite rock driven, aren't they? They're quite sort of dominated by long musical solos and sort of guitar and stuff.
It's very similar to the theme itself. Has a lot of the same forces and the same style, and so it just feels like a companion piece to the main theme, really.
Yeah, definitely. It's interesting to wonder what Santangelo might have done, or whether this was just the product of his own choice coming down to patrol, or maybe he was reassigned as part of the detail finishing. It's
either way, it wasn't particularly fair of Rawls, because he did make somewhat of a deal with him, and Santangelo ended up giving him what he wanted, even if it was somewhat by accident through that psychic woman.
Yeah,
Madame LaRue.
We're constantly reminded that he has a very low clearance rate, and perhaps it's just come to the point where...
Never brought up again,
Yeah, never brought it back up. And you don't even get the sense that even if he did spot Bubbles and Johnny grabbing the copper, he wouldn't quite be motivated enough to go and chase him. But you never know.
It's quite... we see that obviously Greg's is on her own as well. It's obviously trying to emphasise somewhat that Cheryl is... There's a somewhat distance between the two of them, because you might have expected to see Cheryl there with her at the hospital at night. So, and she's kind of down this long corridor all by herself. So it's her solitude is very more than hinted at in that little section.
Yeah, it's a very, very grim outlook for Greg's at the end here, and it very quickly looks up at the start of season 2 when she's like straight back in the fold. Albeit desk working for a couple of episodes, but yeah, I mean, she comes back up to speed very quickly.
And we have McNulty on the boat, and we see him on the boat a lot more, obviously, in season 2. We obviously already talked about how he was sent there partly of his own making, having told Landsman. And we also see that he's not particularly good with his knots. Although that comes later on.
It's a running gag. Yeah, I mean, we see Claude, I think, as well, who's like his partner on the Marine unit for the first half of season 2. So that they're setting up all these pieces really, really nicely, so we can launch straight into season 2. And they've also, I've noticed they've spent the past couple of episodes in season 1 building up a rapport between Bunk and Lester, and they seem to be accompanying each other. The Roy Brown scene. And that they were kind of helping each other out in the investigation down in the detail room, and they're clearly, I guess, they're doing this to make them teaming up on the homicide cases next season have a much more natural chemistry to it, because they become a bit of a double act next season, and I think season 2 is actually Bunk's best season. I enjoy Bunk a hell of a lot in season 2. He's hilarious, but it's nice that they're trying so hard to set all these things up in really nice ways.
So that's all the main points that I have for this episode. So do either of you want to bring up any other sections or anything about season 1 in general?
Not particularly. I mean, it's probably worth mentioning that Prez scene with the detail room, like the shutting out the lights. I think that's the only scene that connects all the montages, because there's always Prez shutting the lights off. And this is the only one that's not at the main detail building in the southeast, but again, it's just a nice little continuity thing that's probably worth mentioning. Otherwise, I guess that the main thing to take away from this episode is just all the bookends. I mean, there's just so many of them. We have all our courtroom stuff, Cantrell chat, the boat resurfacing from episode 1, Herc chatting to the newbies, the CGI towers. We even have Poot schooling a new Wallace called Dink. There's serious visual likenesses there, and Landsman's Reasonable Sir, the refresher on how the homicide system works in a town with 350 murders a year, just hammering home this cyclical nature of of business in Baltimore and the game on both sides, really. So it's something that I kind of took away from the episode overall.
And more people being drawn in and having faith in these institutions, and ultimately either being let down or having to let others down in order to serve their own self-interest.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that's all despite the fact that at the end of the day, everyone's kind of sentenced on both sides of the law. And I guess that's kind of what the episode was saying, really, that everyone kind of faces the consequences.
Mm-hmm.
So with that in mind, let's take a look at our final sections.
Are you the man with them jumbo sixes?
I mean, you fucking won.
Took about 3 or 400. Hey, puta. All in the game, yo. All in the game.
And we'll start with some favourite scenes. Tom, what was your favourite scene from this episode, or favourite scenes, plural?
Favourite scenes. I would probably have to reiterate what I said earlier about Wee-Bey. I'm a huge fan of him, and specifically the scene in which he owns up to the murders. I don't know, there's something so visceral about the way he eats. You know, it's not like disgusting or anything, it's just a really nice accompaniment. Like, I think The Wire does that so well throughout its kind of, seasons. It really kind of knows how to flesh out a character with minor props or minor affectations, and just the idea of this guy who's killed so many people just kind of like, passively agreeing to more and more in favour of horseradish was just something I found really like kind of depressing inwardly. And I think it's a fantastic scene.
It's another use of that strange surrealist idea coming into these quite dark moments where you have something very serious and they're usually about murder or something horrible like that, and then they'll throw in this light-hearted trivial problem or trivial comment, and it just becomes totally surreal. You're just like, is this really happening? Like, are we really supposed to be disappointed about not being able to get the condiment we want after confessing to X murders? It's madness.
He's had enough.
The Wire highlights that.
Yeah, exactly.
When you are facing the death penalty, though, as they batted that word around in this episode, food becomes the most important thing, doesn't it? That's kind of the one luxury that death row patients are afforded. Their meal of their choice. So I guess Wee-Bey kind of knows that and wants to hold that sacred.
And we've already had the sense of last meal being used, especially with Wallace before they kind of go and eat at that cafe.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So
but, you were saying?
No. I was just kind of agreeing with you guys. Yeah, that's personally my favourite. But what about you, man? What do you enjoy?
I will offer up another interrogation scene, say the one with D'Angelo. It's a very long scene, so obviously there's a lot to take in there. But I just think that Larry Gillard Jr.'s acting is incredible. I think he portrays the empathy of what is really quite an awkward character on paper. But the portrayal is brilliant. I think the public defender from Jersey is there as a brilliant reminder for the audience and kind of seeing this contrast. I think that you see how McNulty is endeared to D'Angelo. Again, despite this kind of like strange backdrop of crime and brutality, we see that D'Angelo is such a likable character and we wish him well, even though he's found himself in this interrogation room for perfectly legitimate reasons, even though it may not be entirely up to him. We feel his despair, we feel how overwhelmed he is, and the length of the scene is really appropriate. I don't think it feels overwrought at all. So yeah, definitely the D'Angelo interrogation scene.
Yeah.
To be honest, mirror your views completely. I didn't know whether it was cheating to pick the montage at the end.
It is.
But I do absolutely adore the montages in The Wire, and I know they're kind of a massive breaking of the rules that they've all set up for this kind of hyper-realism. But there's something so consistent about them, and there's something so fantastically good in them that ties everything together. And it just adds a bit of an emotional punch to the end of each season that feels a little bit needed sometimes in a show that's so kind of stark and unsentimental. That just puts the right note on it. It just really sends you off with the right note that they always really satisfy me, and the one here is no exception.
Yeah.
So I kind of, perhaps, I think that the montage really hits the spot for me as a good scene.
It is a great way to end any kind of season, I guess, as well. It is that kind of that curtain call, and it almost feels like a visual credits list.
Yeah.
You kind of see all the characters.
Yeah, it's
kind of get a sense of what everyone's doing.
It's really redeemed the concept of a montage, really. I mean, prior to that, it was more of like a sort of cliched narrative, sitcom device. But here it's used. Yeah, the images are so powerful, aren't they? Every single one really resonates, and you can't wait to see the next character. And they all do justice and offer up more questions. It's and that step by step. It's wonderful.
It's really, really good tune.
It's just absolutely stinging harmonica.
It doesn't feel like it's there to just pass a passage of time.
No,
it actually feels like it feels very parallel. It feels like they're all on top of one another, rather than just time passing is an excuse to get a few things out of the way, some establishing shots. Having it at the end definitely helps. Just winds us down, and then reminds us to be excited for the next season.
Yeah. All right. Tom or Alex, did you have a favourite character from this episode? If it's possible to pick one.
Oh my god.
Yeah, I struggle to bring one up.
I like the fact that Perlman finally steps up in a big way for the first time, really, in the show.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we do see a lot more of her here.
She dominates a lot of the scenes, and obviously because it's the sentencing episode, it's about time you bring out your prosecutor. She really does kind of steal a lot of the scenes here.
Levy, I would maybe offer up as well. I think.
Yeah,
similarly.
he was another choice for me.
He's excellent.
And I did enjoy seeing Carver in kind of a new and compromised position.
Rhonda, who is Jewish, by the way.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I wouldn't have said that straight away. But
yeah, I think I read it quite a while ago, some David Simon interview in which they were sort of talking about what we were talking about, the stereotype of Levy, and he kind of countered it with that. So.
Okay. Yeah. Well, there we go. Yeah, I've kind of put 3 down because I can never pick because it's just so ensemble heavy.
Oh yeah.
But Perlman, Levy, and Carver I put for this episode really stood out heavily.
Yeah, and I think maybe it's a bit obvious, but I think it's reasonable to put D'Angelo down there as well. This is a really big episode for him, so.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think like you say, Perlman, Levy, Carver is kind of 3. Sometimes it's nice to pin it on a somewhat less, more unsung character for episodes. It's easy to pick out the obvious big performances, but even in such an ensemble cast. But yeah, Perlman is a good shout, I think, because we see a lot more of her in this episode. Mm-hmm. A lot of range as well in her performance. A lot of range, especially in that
right
obvious scene with Bunk and. With Bunk and McNulty, where she sort of throws the tape recorder on and glares at McNulty, and then offers a kind of very warm, kind smile to Bunk.
Yeah.
So that's the most obvious example of it. So yeah, that's our favourite characters, and I guess that brings us to the very final part of our episode. So let's start with the title anyway, if we want to say a bit about that. If you want to say it, because you were saying, Toby, that there's sentencing on both sides. I was thinking right at the start there is almost a little mini sentencing where Kima is given the chance to, put Wee-Bey in, but she declines out of principle.
Yeah, that's true. I've felt that the last 3 episodes have had very direct meanings in their names, and they kind of almost demarcate 3 major chapters in the end game of the investigation. So you have the hunt, which then needs the cleanup, and once the dust is settled, you get the sentencing. So it's kind of it's very direct in the way they've just kind of stipulated these chapters. And then obviously the titular sentences don't just apply to the Barksdales, but also to the police. Although we only really see McNulty and Carver's kind of sentence explicitly here, we find out the fates of Daniels, Greggs, Freeman, Herc, etc. they'll be revealed come season 2. So I guess it's just direct, really. There's not a lot to take away from it.
Everyone is sort of sentenced to some degree to some new position. I mean, you could say that McNulty is sentenced to the boat, for example, for his his actions and blowing his top off in front of the FBI people and getting angry at them and calling people names. That gets Burrell involved because he finds out about it, and thus, for his actions, he is sentenced to the boat. I guess it's quite open-ended in that sense.
Yeah, it lacks the kind of plural nature that a lot of the other Wire titles have.
I think season 2 should be a blast because everything is kind of a sea-based metaphor.
Yeah.
So
get nautical.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And the epigraph, which is extremely wide, extremely broad in its statement.
And doesn't it say
West Baltimore traditional?
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
I think they misnamed Omar, but
yeah.
I think we hear everyone say it at some point.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of more of a cultural gestalt than an actual sort of just attributable phrase.
It kind of is the aggregate phrase to describe the show, isn't it? Really, so.
It's your season 2 DVD cover tag, really, isn't it? Like, it's kind of what it is.
Well, unless you want to put A New Case Begins on it, in which case you can.
Yeah, which is just like the most. Thanks for
it's
that.
A little bit generic, isn't it?
Yeah, does it? Yeah. A new case would have been better.
Yeah.
What about Listen Carefully?
Yeah. Is Read Between the Lines the one for season 5?
It is.
That's all right. That's okay.
No Corner Left Behind.
Yeah.
For season 4. That's not as clever as it thinks it is.
No, it's not. Is it? It's clumsy.
The best one's probably Listen Carefully for season 1.
That actually has ties to the name.
Yeah.
That's only kind of a bit more. It feels a bit better. What's 3?
3 doesn't have one.
No, they couldn't even be bothered. They were like, no ideas. Sorry.
Yeah. No, I think they, whichever DVD company they used to do the marketing stuff, they just perhaps. Great
visuals, like the visuals.
Yeah, season 3 has the best DVD cover, isn't it?
Yeah.
But it does feel like, I don't know, that quality of communication isn't quite captured in the writing.
The thing that I hate about the DVDs is that they're plastered in spoilers. Like, the back of the season 3 DVD has a massive picture behind the blurb of McNulty arresting Avon at the end of the season.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
Like, come on! And then if you open up the season 2 DVD and you see each episode has a little mugshot. The mugshot for episode 6 is D'Angelo being strangled. I mean, who wants to see that? So it's just dear.
Well, that's why I said I feel like they've been made by people who haven't actually watched the show.
Yeah, it's terrible, and they haven't been vetted by anyone who has seen the show. So I mean, I don't know what happened there, but yeah, it's not good, really.
Boo, institutions, etc., etc., etc.
Perhaps they're just making a point. Yeah, we'll ruin the show for everyone.
Yeah, it's a real
It's actually really clever. Yeah, and we've missed it completely.
Yeah, No Corner Left Behind is meant to be bad. We're too stupid to get it. Yeah.
It's indicative of the poor education system. There is nothing we can't analyse.
Oh dear. So, oh dear.
On that note, is there anything else that you want to add before we close up this bumper edition of Caught on the Wire?
Quite a while. Damn. Almost 2 hours.
No, I think I guess the end game position is that Barksdale versus Police season 1, more or less a draw, arrests and losses on both sides. No win to speak of, so that's our sentencing. Anyway, that's not much of an epigraph. I'm sorry.
Oh man.
So yeah, that's the final episode. Thank you very much for joining us, Tom. It's been a pleasure having you with us.
No. Thank you. It's been great. It's been really good. I can't wait to hear
Please do go and check out Tom's stuff. You've got obviously a YouTube channel that you mentioned.
Yeah. If you're into art.
This is another prominent
blog
plugging
as well.
opportunity, so...
No, but in all seriousness, check, search the Wire bars, rap battle bars. It'll be up really soon, and I think any Wire fan will definitely enjoy it. And it'll probably be a really good introduction to just battles. If you're not into battles, maybe you might enjoy it. And search. I'll leave a list of all the battles themselves as well if you want to see the whole thing. So yeah, do check that out. But no, thanks Toby, thank you Alex. It's been great, and
yeah, thanks for coming on, man.
It's so cool that you guys are going to do this, the whole thing. Like, how many episodes is it again? 50, 60?
60, yeah.
60.
So we've done over 20%.
So on a kind of...
But there's a long way to go.
On a week-by-week basis, you'll be done by, what, April?
Maybe
earlier
early
than that.
2016, maybe. If we take breaks like we are.
Oh, okay. Early 2016.
Yeah, we've still got a way to go, but it's a project, you know?
No, it's... ironically.
Yeah, exactly.
The Jeks.
We will probably put that video up on the blog, which you can find at courtonthewire.wordpress.com. We'll be putting a few more updates here and there as they come along. We will be moving on to Season 2, but that will be in the new year. We're going to have a short break for the Christmas period and whatnot, just because... I don't know, just take a break from the Wire, I guess, for a little bit. I feel quite overwhelmed with how much Wire information I've got written down and stored in my mind thanks to doing this.
Yeah, I mean, literally every scene of the entire season we have stewed over to some extent. So, as far as podcasting goes, we are going to new depths, and it takes a lot more time than you might expect to go over everything. So I think it's about right that we take just a few weeks just to get ourselves ready for Season 2.
Yeah, and I'm really looking forward to it as well.
Oh yeah, Season 2 is phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal.
As we were saying, this is kind of just a prelude to the show, isn't it? Season 1. I mean, so it's going to get more and more interesting as we go through.
So yeah, with that, I guess we should wrap things up. So do check out the website. Do check out for any extra updates on there. Thanks again for Tom for joining us, and we shall see you in the new year for Season 2 of Caught on the Wire.
What you know about Baltimore? What you know about Baltimore?